Hi everyone, this is Tholin with a new Retroid Pocket 2 emulation video. This time we are going to focus on my personal favorite console, which is the Game Boy Advance. Now, the Game Boy Advance was the 32-bit version of the Game Boy, and it is, to me, one of the best consoles ever created by Nintendo, as you could have more or less the full library of Super Nintendo in your hands. Now, for our emulation, we will use RetroArch as usually, and the first step is to go and download the appropriate core for the Nintendo Game Boy Advance emulation, which in our case is the MGBA. If you don't have it, you can go to download cores to download it, and then you can select it from the load core menu and load it to RetroArch. The next step, as always, is to scan your appropriate folder for the available Game Boy Advance ROMs that you have downloaded. You go to scan directory, you select the directory, then wait a few seconds, and then you can begin playing the games. We will check around 9 games in this video to see some hidden gems and some mega hits for this amazing portable console, for this amazing handheld. And the first game we are going to check is the Castlevania Aria of Sorrow. Castlevania Aria of Sorrow is a 2003 side-scrolling Metroidvania game that was developed and published by Konami. It is the third installment of the Castlevania series on the Game Boy Advance, and it was led by the Castlevania producer Koji Igarashi, who had led the previous production teams for other Castlevania titles. Now, this title didn't sell that well in Japan, but it was a mega hit in the United States, and it had a sequel, which was Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow, that was released in 2005. This game, along with another Castlevania title, which is Harmony of Dissonance, was also released as a double pack in North America, an amazing cartridge that included both Aria of Sorrow and Harmony of Dissonance. Now, Aria of Sorrow is considered one of the best Castlevania games, of course, after Symphony of the Night, and it is a typical Metroidvania game, a side-scrolling platformer, let's say, that you can progress and reach new parts of each level after you improve your character and gain more skills. Now, with regards to the actual emulation, this runs without any problems on the Retroid Pocket 2 using RetroArch. You can play it without any input lag, the sound is fine, I don't have any problems with that, and I'm going to mention a lot in that video that you may find other ways to play the Game Boy Advance games, maybe on your old Game Boy Advance if you have the cartridge, or in a later Game Boy model. But what is absolutely magnificent using the Retroid Pocket 2 is that you can enjoy the amazing graphics of this 32-bit handheld that were toned down a lot in the original Game Boy Advance due to the poor performing screen that it had. The Game Boy Advance only got a nice backlit screen on its second revision on the Game Boy Advance SP, the model AGS101. Up until that time, the Game Boy Advance did not have a backlit screen, and the quality of those amazing graphics were not depicted accurately as you played. Moving on to our second game, we are going to test an RPG, and this is one of the absolute hidden gems of this system. I'm talking, of course, about Golden Sun, one iconic RPG series that was exclusive to the Game Boy Advance up until the third installment in the series that was for the Nintendo DS. But other than that, those two games, Golden Sun and Golden Sun The Lost Age, are among the best Japanese RPGs, along of course with some others like the Final Fantasy series, that you can enjoy on the Game Boy Advance system. Now, Golden Sun was developed by Camelot Software Planning, and it was published by Nintendo. It follows the story of a group of magically attuned adepts, let's say, who are charged with preventing the potential destructive power of alchemy in the world. The two original games, Golden Sun and Golden Sun The Lost Age, were released in 2001 and 2002 respectively for the Game Boy Advance. The third game, as already mentioned, it was released for the Nintendo DS. This series has received very favorable reviews by critics. Its sales were not very high, but that was due to the fact that the genre, especially when moving away from Japan or Europe, is not that popular. However, there is a big movement of following the typical and classic Japanese RPGs even on the Game Boy Advance system. Now, other than that, the emulation again runs without any problems whatsoever. You can enjoy the game to its fullest. You can see how great those graphics look. It's not the typical 2D sprites. The sprites are they resemble a lot that of the games developed by Rare. It's not the classical 2D animated sprites, but they look more like Silicon Graphics one, to be honest. The backgrounds are amazing, the effects are great. As you can see, there are a lot of lightning effects as we play on the first moments of the game. Your character begins alone as you start the story, but then you create a group, which is typical of almost every Japanese RPG that you can find, and this is the first character that you can meet as you progress, and he becomes a part of your party. If you haven't played any of the Golden Sun series, then I suggest you do, especially if you are a Japanese RPG fan. Start with this one, then go to the Lost Age, which follows the story, and you can also try the third game that was released for the Nintendo DS. For our third game, we will go to a more action-packed game, and this is Grand Theft Auto Advance. Now, this game was developed by Digital Eclipse, and it was published by Rockstar Games, who is the IP owner of the Grand Theft Auto series. It is the 8th installment in the Grand Theft Auto series, and it was released for the Game Boy Advance in 2004. It takes place in Liberty City, which is the same used for Grand Theft Auto 3, to which the story serves as a prequel. Now, this particular story is set 1 year before the actual Grand Theft Auto 3 and follows a small-time criminal Mike on his quest for revenge after his partner's supposed death. The introduction is has a more comic or graphic novel style to it. The game has a top-down perspective similar to the first two games of the series. However, it also features most gameplay elements from the 3D Grand Theft Auto games, including the vehicle-based side missions, the use of safe houses, a lot of weapons from other installments in the series, and the style of the heads-up display. As you can see, it is quite reminiscent of the first top-down games of the Grand Theft Auto series. To me, it looks more like the first one, actually, like the same engine used, and that was due to the fact, due to the actual hardware limitations of the system. However, it runs without any problems on the RetroArch for the Retroid Pocket 2, and you can enjoy this prequel to this magnificent series of games, which is quite iconic and had a lot of backlash when it was released due to its extreme violence and the criminal situations that it portrayed. Moving on from this more adult themed game, we will go to a more kid-friendly one, typical of the Nintendo releases. This, of course, is another iconic IP by HAL Laboratory and Nintendo in general, and we're talking about Kirby and the Nightmare in Dreamland. Now, this game is a platformer developed by HAL Laboratory and published by Nintendo for the Game Boy Advance in 2002, and it is a remake of the 1993 Nintendo Entertainment System original, which was called Kirby's Adventure. Now, Kirby Nightmare in a Dreamland is a traditional Kirby platformer. The player controls the main character, who is of course Kirby, whose objective is to get to the end of each stage using copy abilities. Each stage is broken up into small sections, ending to a door leading to the next section, usually 5 to 6 sections per level. At the end of every level there is a boss fight in which Kirby must win in order to get a piece of the Star Road back, which is part of the actual main story. In general, this game is true to the original, but it has some improvements like the updated graphics that could be supported by the 32-bit engine of the Game Boy Advance. It also supports 4 players playing simultaneously through GameLink and some minor level redesign and removal of particular enemies. Other than that, it's a typical nice Kirby game that you or your kids can enjoy. Moving on, we are going to one of the best games both for the Game Boy Advance but also for the Nintendo consoles in general. I am talking of course about The Legend of Zelda The Minish Cap, which is the 5th game in this video. Now, the Minish Cap is a game that was developed by Capcom, but Nintendo was closely monitoring the development of this game in order for it to be true to its origins. It is the 3rd Zelda game that involves the legend of the Four Swords, expanding on the story of Four Swords and Four Swords Adventures. It was generally very well received and it is considered among the best Game Boy Advance games, and it was also featured as the 2005 Game of the Year for this system. The Minish Cap retains the general gameplay features that were present in previous Zelda installments. The main protagonist, Link, must navigate several dungeons to obtain an item or enhancement at the end of each dungeon. What is different in this game is the presence of a magical talking cap named Eslo, who can shrink Link to the size of a Minish. Now, the Minish is a bug-sized race that lives in Hyrule and can help Link in his adventure. You must change sizes, shrink, or go back to your normal size in order to navigate the dungeons that are available or even navigate the overworld. The Minish Cap features a number of enhancements that benefit from the more powerful Game Boy Advance and its 32-bit technology. The game's camera angle is much closer to the ground, allowing more detail. As you can see on the screen, the graphics are amazing. In the overworld and in dungeons, the game replaces the traditional item interface of the handheld Zelda games with pictures associating items or actions with buttons. This is similar to the 3D titles in the series like Ocarina of Time. The game advances also the combat system from previous handheld installments by allowing Link to learn new sword techniques throughout the game, some of which were also present in older games, but a lot of them are new. As the game progresses, Link will collect elements that will fuse with his sword, allowing him to make copies of himself using glowing floor panels and that are used to solve puzzles such as pushing large blocks or hitting multiple switches simultaneously. To me, the Minish Cap is among the best Zelda games along with Link to the Past or Ocarina of Time, so if you are a Zelda fan, then don't forget to try this game. And if you want to play it, what better way to use your Retroid Pocket 2 in order to enjoy those amazing hand-drawn 2D graphics that the game features. If you haven't started playing Zelda games, then this is not the first game to start. You can go to the Link to the Past and then move to this one, as it has different and updated mechanics compared to the original installments of the Zelda series. But it is a very nice introduction prior to moving to the 3D games like Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask. For our next game, we will go to the icon of Nintendo. I'm talking of course about Mario, but this game is not the typical Super Mario platformer, it's a more racing game. I'm talking of course about Mario Kart Super Circuit. This game was developed by Intelligent Systems, a Japanese video game developer best known for developing Fire Emblem, Paper Mario and WarioWare games, and it was released through Nintendo in 2001. It is the third installment in the Mario Kart series following Super Mario Kart of 1992 and Mario Kart 64 of 1996, and it is also the first for the handheld consoles in general. The game retains traditional game elements of Mario Kart series and received critical acclaim upon release, selling more than 2 million copies in the United States alone. Super Circuit is a kart racing video game in which the player races in a kart against other teams in different courses. The game screen indicates the current standings in a race, the number of laps needed to complete or finish the race, and incoming weapons. Like in the previous installments, players can pick up item boxes to receive a randomly selected item and use it to stop or impede the opponents either in the front or in the back in order to gain an advantage. Some items such as shells and banana peels allow the player to hit others to slow them down, while other items such as the star power-up render the player temporarily invisible to attacks. It is the second Mario Kart game to include coins, which increases the engine power of the karts. There are 5 game modes in Super Circuit: Mario GP, Time Trial, Quick Run, VS and Battle, and most of these modes can be played by themselves in single-player races, while some others can be played in multiplayer mode. As you can see, this game plays without any problems on this particular emulation on the Retroid Pocket 2, and it is a very improved version compared to the original Mario Kart from 1992, as it capitalized on the improved technology that the Game Boy Advance had. For our 7th game, we will go to a more action-paced game again. We are talking about Metal Slug Advance, a game that was developed by Noise Factory, a Japanese video game developer based in Osaka that was established by former Atlus staff. It was released for the Game Boy Advance in 2004 under the SNK publisher, the company that was behind the Neo Geo series of consoles and a lot of arcade games. Now, the gameplay is typical to other Metal Slug games, but with two new systems introduced, the life system and the card system. The life system is simply a life bar for players, replacing the old extra lives that the previous Metal Slug games had. As the players take damage, the life bar depletes, and by collecting food items you can restore health. The card system is a card collecting part of the game. Cards can be found from shooting certain parts of the background and by obtaining them from certain hostages, or sometimes by doing both. The cards have many different purposes, from giving detailed info on items and characters from the Metal Slug series to boosting player abilities or even unlocking special slugs. There are 100 cards to collect, and collecting them all becomes the main objective to anyone who defeats the final boss. Now, all in all, this is a typical Metal Slug game. There are a lot of Metal Slug games released over more than 2 decades now, and it is one of the most iconic action IPs coming out of Japan. It is typical, you have to kill the enemies and rescue hostages as you progress. Of course, at the end of every level there is a boss that you have to win in order to complete the level. We have 2 more games to go, and as already mentioned in other Nintendo videos, there is never a complete Nintendo emulation video without a Pokemon game. This time it is the Pokemon Fire Red version. Now, Pokemon Fire Red version and Pokemon Leaf Green, they were released in 2004 simultaneously and were the enhanced remakes of the 1996 RPG video games Pokemon Red and Pokemon Blue. They were developed by Game Freak and published by the Pokemon Company and Nintendo for the Game Boy Advance. The games are part of the third generation of the Pokemon video game series and hold the distinction of being the first enhanced remakes of previous games within the IP. As in previous games, the player controls the player character from an overhead perspective and participates in turn-based battles using his collected Pokemon and his starter Pokemon that he chooses when he begins his adventure. Throughout the games, the player captures and raises Pokemon for use in battle, and some new features include a contextual help menu and a new region the player may access after a certain point in the story. The games have compatibility with the Game Boy Advance wireless adapter, which originally came bundled with the games, not of course in the player's choice re-release of these particular games. They received mostly positive reviews, obtaining an aggregate score of 81% on Metacritic, and most critics praised the fact that the games introduced new features while still maintaining the traditional gameplay of the Pokemon games. The game director Junichi Masuda stated that the new titles, Pokemon Leaf Green and Fire Red, will be developed around the idea of simplicity, as the game engine was a slightly modified version of the one used in Pokemon Ruby and Pokemon Sapphire. As a result, Fire Red and Leaf Green were made fully backwards compatible with Ruby and Sapphire, allowing players to trade Pokemon between games. The music that was used in this game was the original music of the previous Red and Blue versions of Pokemon, but a bit enhanced and updated by adding additional sounds. Some of the songs have additional key changes compared to the original soundtrack, and some songs such as the Trainer Battle are rewritten in MIDI for the Game Boy Advance and contain a lot of enhancements. I know that there are hundreds of Pokemon games out there, but if you want to try one of the classics in its best version to me, then I suggest you pick up either Fire Red or Leaf Green, along of course with Ruby, with Sapphire, and the later releases of Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Pokemon games are iconic. They use more or less the same recipe up until today. The later games just improved the graphic engine, but other than that the gameplay is the same. It is a franchise that it is still very strong today, highly collectible, and I suggest you give it a try if you haven't already. For our last game in this video, we go back to the Super Mario franchise. We are talking of course about Super Mario Advance 2 or Super Mario World, which is actually the remake of Super Mario World from the Super Nintendo and the original Mario Bros. Game. You can select either of those games in the beginning and the title screen. Now, this game is actually a remake, as we said, from the original game that was developed by Nintendo, and it was released in 2001. There are numerous gameplay, visual and level design changes from the original game, but the most notable is the fact that this game is now a single player game only. Still, you can select Luigi, but as an alternative character. The gameplay and plot are the same as in the original, and you have to control either Mario or Luigi and Yoshi, of course, adventuring through Dinosaur Island in order to stop the evil King Bowser and his minions who have kidnapped Princess Peach. Of course, there are not a lot to say about the Super Mario game. It's one of the best platformers that you can find in any system. If you haven't tried it, then okay, stop this video and go right ahead to enjoy it. Now everyone, that was all for our emulation guide for the Game Boy Advance on the Retroid Pocket 2 using RetroArch. I hope you have enjoyed the video, and if you did, please thumb up and subscribe to the channel as we have more content coming soon. Thank you all for watching.